Once upon a time, a passionate CEO called his employee to sit at his table during the company party, just the two of them. She didn't expect what was coming, and when the truth came to light, their lives changed forever. A story of passion and transformation that will touch your heart. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like and comment where you are watching from. The fine December rain drummed against the windows of the 23rd floor of the corporate building on Fifth Avenue, creating a hypnotic rhythm that contrasted with the excitement of the Tech Global Innovations holiday party. Sarah Johnson discreetly adjusted the black blazer she had bought specifically for the occasion, an investment that cost almost half her salary, but one she deemed necessary to feel worthy of the environment. At 42, Sarah carried not only the responsibility of managing the human resources department of one of the largest tech companies in the country, but also the weight of expectations from a traditional Italian family that never fully understood her. Professional ambitions. Her dark brown hair, always tied in a flawless bun, framed a face that revealed the quiet determination of someone who had fought for every achievement. Her green eyes, a legacy from Grandmother Mary, sparkled with sharp intelligence, but also carried a vulnerability she constantly struggled to hide. "Sarah, you look stunning today," commented Emily Davis, her 20-something assistant, approaching with a glass of champagne. "This event is amazing, right? I've never seen so many important people in one place." Sarah smiled, accepting the drink. The event hall on the top floor had been transformed into a true palace. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceiling, reflecting 1,000 points of golden light over tables adorned with white orchid arrangements. The aroma of Moët en Chandon mingled with the sophisticated perfume of the executives and the characteristic scent of Italian leather from the imported furniture. "It's truly impressive," Sarah agreed, observing the guests. Directors, managers, international investors, all mingled in small groups, engaged in conversations that could define the future of the company. "I just hope it's a good omen for the coming year." Across the hall, Michael Anderson commanded a circle of executives with the natural ease of someone born to lead. At 45, the CEO of Tech Global possessed a magnetic presence that dominated any room. Tall, broad-shouldered, and with graying temples that only accentuated his distinction, Michael had the gift of making each person feel like they were the only one in the room when he directed his attention to them. His blue-gray eyes, however, carried shadows that few could perceive, the weight of secrets and decisions that shaped not only his career, but his soul. "The expansion project into the Midwest is progressing better than we expected," he explained to a group of Japanese investors, gesturing elegantly as he spoke. "The reception from local communities has been extraordinary." Sarah watched from afar, admiring the ease with which he transitioned between English and even a few words in Japanese. She had known Michael for 3 years, since he took over the company after the sudden death of the founding father, but they rarely had conversations beyond the strictly professional. He was a respected figure, feared by some, admired by many, but he always maintained an aristocratic distance that seemed insurmountable. "Michael is looking at you," whispered Jessica Brown, her best friend and the company's lawyer, appearing beside Sarah with a mischievous smile. Jessica, a 38-year-old woman with impeccably platinum blonde hair and a smile that concealed personal battles, had a habit of observing everything and everyone with the precision of a natural investigator. "And it's not the first time today." "Don't be ridiculous, Jessica," Sarah retorted, but she felt the blush rising to her cheeks. "He must be observing the whole party. It's his responsibility as the host." Of course," Jessica laughed, adjusting the pearl necklace she always wore, a gift from her ex-husband that she refused to take off, even 2 years after the divorce. "That's why he dismissed the Japanese and is coming our way." Sarah instinctively turned, and indeed, Michael was walking toward her with determined steps. Her heart involuntarily raced. There was something in the way he moved, confident yet with a subtle urgency that made her nervous. "Sarah," his voice was deep, velvety, with a hint of a New York accent that he had never completely lost. "Could I speak with you for a moment?" "Of course, Mr. Anderson," she replied, struggling to keep her voice steady. "Michael, please. I think we've worked together long enough to drop the formalities." He smiled, and Sarah noticed how his expression lines deepened, giving him an irresistible, mature charm. "Actually, I'd like to extend an invitation." Jessica discreetly cleared her throat. "Well, I'm going to get more champagne." "Excuse me." She stepped away, but Sarah knew she would stay close, watching. Michael led Sarah to a more secluded area of the hall, near the windows that offered a stunning view of the illuminated city. The lights of New York stretched to the horizon like a sea of terrestrial stars, creating an almost cinematic backdrop. "Sarah, I've been observing your work for some time," he began, stopping in front of her with a proximity that made her feel the scent of his cologne, something expensive, sophisticated with notes of sandalwood and bergamot. "Your dedication, your ability to resolve conflicts, the way you bring people together around common goals. It's rare to find someone with that combination of technical competence and emotional intelligence. Thank you, Mr. Michael," she corrected herself, feeling strangely vulnerable under his intense gaze. "That's why I want to make a proposal." He paused for a moment, as if carefully choosing his words. "I'm forming a special team to lead a project that could revolutionize not only our company, but the entire corporate culture in America. A project that combines technological innovation with social responsibility, something I believe is the future of business." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. "What kind of project?" "An organizational transformation initiative that promotes gender equality, sustainability, and social inclusion across all areas of the company. We want to become a national reference, perhaps even international." Her eyes sparkled with genuine passion. "And I want you to lead this initiative." The silence that followed was charged with electricity. Sarah could hear the distant sound of music, the murmur of conversations, the clinking of glasses, but everything felt muffled by the magnitude of what she had just heard. I don't know what to say," she murmured, genuinely surprised. "Say you'll have dinner with me tomorrow to discuss the details." His voice dropped a tone, becoming almost intimate. "I know a discreet restaurant in the Upper East Side, just the two of us, away from corporate pressures. I want you to fully understand the scope of what I'm proposing." Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. There was something in the way he said "just the two of us" that carried multiple meanings. Her rational mind screamed that this was an extraordinary professional opportunity, but her intuition picked up nuances that transcended the corporate realm. "Michael, this is an incredible opportunity," she replied, struggling to organize her thoughts. "But I need to think it over. It's a huge responsibility." "That's exactly why I chose you." He stepped a little closer, his voice lowering even more. "Sarah, can I be frank with you?" She nodded, hypnotized by his eyes that seemed to see directly into her soul. "This company needs a deep renewal. There are many outdated practices that need to be changed, people who resist change, and I need someone I can trust completely." His hand almost touched her arm, stopping inches from her skin. "Someone integral, courageous, someone like you." Sarah felt as if she were on the edge of a precipice. Part of her wanted to retreat, to stay safe in her current position, in the predictability of her life with Edward. But another part, a part that had remained dormant for years, vibrated with the possibility of finally being recognized, of leading something meaningful. "The dinner," she heard her own voice say, as if it belonged to someone else. "What time?" The smile that lit up Michael's face was triumphant, but also filled with an unexpected tenderness. 8 o'clock. "I'll send the address by message." At that moment, Sarah Johnson could not imagine that this simple yes would be the first step of a journey that would transform not only her career, but her entire perception of power, ambition, and the dangerous territories of the human heart. Le Gourmet, located in a renovated colonial house in the Upper East Side, exuded discreet sophistication. Exposed brick walls, Indirect lighting from wrought iron fixtures and the unmistakable aroma of imported spices created an intimate atmosphere that made Sarah question whether this was truly a business meeting. She arrived 15 minutes late, having changed her outfit 3 times at home, finally opting for a navy blue dress that Edward always said accentuated her eyes. Michael was already seated at a reserved table in the most discreet corner of the establishment, casually flipping through the menu. When he saw her approaching, he stood up with the natural elegance of someone who had frequented places like this since adolescence. "Sarah, you look stunning," he said, pulling out the chair for her, with a chivalrous gesture that made her feel special in a way she hadn't experienced in years. "Thank you," she replied, settling into the chair and trying to ignore how his cologne, the same as the previous night, invaded her senses. "I apologize for being late. The traffic was impossible, I can imagine. New York doesn't forgive anyone." Michael discreetly signaled to the sommelier. "I brought some documents about the project, but first I'd like us to relax a bit. It's been an intense week for all of us." The sommelier, a middle-aged man with a graying mustache, approached with deference. "Good evening, Mr. Anderson. The usual table." "I see. Good evening, James. This is Ms. Sarah Johnson, our new Director of Special Projects." The naturalness with which Michael introduced her to her new position made Sarah choke slightly on her water. "I haven't officially accepted yet," she interrupted, casting a warning glance at Michael. "But you will," he replied with a confident smile. "James, bring us that Barolo 2018 you set aside especially." As the sommelier walked away, Sarah felt the need to establish some boundaries. "Michael, I need to be clear about a few things before we discuss any project." "Of course." Feel free." She took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "First, I'm in a serious relationship. Edward and I have been together for 5 years and plan to get married soon. Second, if I'm going to accept this position, it needs to be clear that it's a strictly professional decision." Michael leaned slightly forward, his gray-blue eyes studying her face with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "Sarah, can I ask you a personal question?" "That depends on the question. Are you happy?" The simplicity of the question caught her off guard. "What do you mean?" "It's a simple question. Do you wake up every morning excited to live the day that's beginning? Do you feel you're realizing your potential, that you're where you're supposed to be?" Sarah fell silent for a moment, nervously fiddling with the engagement ring Edward had given her 2 years earlier, a modest solitaire but chosen with care. "I don't understand where you're going with this." "Where I'm going is that life is too short to waste our talents out of fear of being judged." Michael accepted the glass of wine that James had brought, waiting for Sarah to do the same before continuing. "I'm 45, Sarah. I've made many mistakes, let many opportunities pass out of fear, out of social convention, out of trying to please people who, in the end, didn't care about me." "Michael, no, let me finish." His voice carried a vulnerability she had never noticed before. "When my father died and I took over the company, I realized I had spent my entire life trying to be the son he wanted. I wanted to be someone other than who I really was. And it cost me precious things. Relationships, opportunities, years of a life that wasn't truly mine." Sarah took a sip of the wine, feeling the complex flavor of the drink reflect the complexity of the moment. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I see in you the same conflict that consumed me for years. A brilliant, talented woman with extraordinary potential, but who hides behind others' expectations." He paused, carefully choosing his words. "When I think about this project, I don't just think about transforming the company. I think about transforming lives, starting with ours." "Ours?" The word slipped from her lips like a whisper. Before Michael could respond, Sarah's phone vibrated. A message from David. "Love, how's the work dinner going? Don't forget we're having dinner with my parents tomorrow. They want to set the wedding date. Love you?" Reality hit her like a bucket of cold water. Here she was, in a romantic restaurant, drinking a bottle of wine worth $300. Discussing life and personal transformation with her CEO, while her fiancé was planning their future with his parents. Problem: Michael asked, noticing her change in expression. David, we're planning our wedding. The words came out with less conviction than she wished. And you want to marry him? The question was simple, but carried a devastating weight. Sarah opened her mouth to automatically respond that yes, of course she wanted to. They had been together for 5 years. They were compatible. He was a good man. But the words refused to come out. It's not a question of wanting or not wanting, she finally said. It's a question of commitment, of responsibility, of fear, Michael gently completed. It's not fear, she protested, but her voice lacked conviction. No, then tell me, when was the last time David made you feel alive? Not safe, not comfortable, but alive. Sarah felt her cheeks heat up. That's none of your business. You're right, it's not. Michael leaned back in his chair, but his eyes remained fixed on her. But it is your business, and you deserve more than a life of conventions. The waiter brought the first course, octopus carpaccio with herb oil, but Sarah could hardly think about food. Her mind was in turmoil, processing not only Michael's words, but the way he looked at her, as if he could see parts of her that she preferred to keep hidden. Tell me about the project, she said, trying to redirect the conversation to safer territory. Michael smiled, as if he knew exactly what she was doing. The project. He opened a leather folder that was beside his chair, pulling out some documents. It's called Nexus. The idea is to create a completely new corporate model, where profit and social responsibility are not antagonistic concepts. As he explained the details, inclusion programs, environmental projects, partnerships with NGOs, creation of internal childcare facilities, flexible policies for working mothers, Sarah felt a genuine excitement grow in her chest. It was exactly the kind of work she had always dreamed of doing, but never believed possible in a company the size of Tech Global Innovations. It's ambitious, she commented, flipping through the documents. Revolutionary even, but you'll face a lot of internal resistance. I know. That's why I need someone who not only believes in the project, but is willing to fight for it. Someone who understands that some battles are worth fighting. And you think I'm that person? I don't think, Sarah, I know. The intensity in his voice made her lift her eyes from the documents. In the last 3 years, I've watched how you handle conflicts, how you manage to mediate impossible situations, how you treat every employee with dignity, regardless of their hierarchical position. You have something that can't be taught in an MBA, genuine empathy. Sarah felt warmth rise in her chest. When was the last time someone praised her like that? When had David stopped seeing her as just the compliant girlfriend and started recognizing her professional qualities? There's another reason, Michael continued, lowering his voice a notch. I need someone I can trust completely. This company. There are things happening that you don't know yet. Decisions that were made before I arrived. People who don't want change. If I'm going to implement Nexus, I need to be sure I have genuine allies. What kind of things? Michael hesitated, as if weighing how much he could reveal. Let's just say not everything at Tech Global is as transparent as it should be. And there are people who prefer to keep it that way. A shiver of unease ran down Sarah's spine. Michael, if there's something wrong with the company, maybe I'm not the right person to... You are exactly the right person. He leaned over the table, his hand almost touching hers. Sarah, who do you trust in the company? Completely, without reservations. She thought for a moment. Jessica, of course, and, well, a few colleagues from HR. And me. The question hung in the air between them like a bridge she needed to decide whether to cross or not. Looking into his eyes, seeing the vulnerability behind the confidence, Sarah felt something inside her stir. A dangerous mix of professional admiration and personal attraction that she preferred not to name. I don't know yet, she answered honestly. To her surprise, Michael smiled. That's the smartest answer you could have given. Trust is built, not demanded. The rest of the dinner flowed into safer territory, discussing timelines, budgets, and implementation strategies. But something had changed in the dynamic between them, a subtle intimacy that hadn't been present at the beginning of the night. When they said goodbye in front of the restaurant, Michael held her hand a second longer than was appropriate. "Sarah, don't make this decision thinking about me or David or anyone else. Think about who you want to be in 10 years. Driving away from... On her way home, Sarah couldn't shake off those words from her mind, nor the persistent feeling that she had just crossed an invisible line that she could never undo. The aroma of homemade marinara sauce and fresh basil filled the entire ground floor of the Brooklyn house, transporting Sarah back to her childhood every time she crossed the kitchen door where her mother, Mary Johnson, orchestrated the Sunday lunch with the precision of a conductor. The solid wood table, a legacy from her great-grandparents who came from Calabria in the 1950s, was set for 8 people, the whole family gathering as they had every Sunday for over 20 years. "Sarah, my dear, you look so thin," exclaimed Mary, a robust woman of 68, with grey hair tied in a low bun and flour-stained hands. "And those dark circles? Are you sleeping well?" "I'm fine, Mom," Sarah replied, kissing her mother's cheeks and inhaling the familiar scent of glycerin soap and spices. "It's just been a hectic week at work." James Johnson, her father, looked up from the newspaper he was religiously reading after lunch. At 72, he maintained an upright posture and a piercing gaze that intimidated the grandchildren, but hid a heart that melted for his only daughter. "Work, work, always work," he grumbled in his still thick Italian accent. "A woman your age should be taking care of the house, the children. When are you going to give me grandchildren?" David, sitting next to Sarah, laughed nervously. "Soon, Mr. Johnson. We're just finalizing a few details." Sarah felt her stomach tighten. Since dinner with Michael on Thursday 3 days ago, she couldn't stop thinking about the question he had asked. "Are you happy?" And now, watching David automatically agree with his father's inquiries, she wondered when her life had become a series of decisions made by other people. "David, dear," Mary turned to Sarah's fiancé with a warm smile, "your mother called me yesterday. She's so excited about the preparations. Did you choose the catering yet?" "Yes, Mrs. Johnson, the event palace on the west side. It's the same place where my brother got married." "Oh, how wonderful. And the date?" Sarah felt all the eyes at the table on her, waiting for an answer she wasn't ready to give. Her brothers, Marco, 40, married with 2 kids, and Paolo, 35, newlywed, watched with that air of fraternal superiority that always irritated her. "We're still deciding," Sarah said vaguely, serving herself more lasagna to avoid the stares. "What do you mean you're still deciding?" Marco interjected, wiping his mouth with the napkin. "You've been engaged for 2 years. Lisa and I got married 6 months after the proposal." "Every couple has their own timeline," Sarah retorted, feeling irritation rise. "Timeline for what?" James slammed his hand on the table, making the dishes rattle. "You're 42, Sarah. You're not a girl anymore. If you want to have kids, you need to hurry." "Dad, no, let me speak." James's dark eyes shone with a mix of concern and patriarchal authority. "I worked my whole life to give you a good life. I sacrificed everything so you could study, have opportunities I never had. But for what? For you to spend your life working like a madwoman and forget to be a woman." Sarah felt her cheeks burn. "I haven't forgotten how to be a woman, Dad. I just have ambitions that go beyond cooking and taking care of the house." "And what's wrong with cooking and taking care of the house?" Mary interjected, clearly offended. "That's how I raised you 3, and you turned out to be good people. There's nothing wrong, Mom, but it's not all I want for my life." David placed his hand over hers in a gesture meant to be comforting, but it irritated her even more. "Sarah is going through an important professional moment," he explained to his in-laws. "She received a promotion offer at work." "What kind of promotion?" Paolo asked, genuinely curious. Sarah hesitated. How could she explain the Nexus project to a family that believed a woman's place was at home? How could she talk about the opportunity to lead a corporate transformation to people who thought her greatest success would be giving them grandchildren? "It's a special project. It's about social responsibility. And how much more does it pay?" James got straight to the point. "Dad, it's not just about money." "Oh, it's not? Then what is it about?" James leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. Because if it's not about money, I don't see why you would need to work even more. David earns well. He can support a family. I like my job, Sarah said, feeling frustration rise in her voice. I like feeling that I'm making a difference. The difference a woman can make is by raising good, honest children, Mary opined, starting to clear the plates. The rest is vanity. Sarah looked around the table, at the familiar faces she loved, but that suddenly seemed to belong to a completely different world than hers. Marco and Paolo silently approved their parents' words. David tried to mediate the situation without taking sides, and she felt like a stranger in her own family. Excuse me, she said, standing up abruptly. I need some air. Sarah walked out the back door, heading to the small yard where her mother cultivated an herb garden. The scent of basil and rosemary calmed her, reminding her of the happy Sundays of her childhood, when her only worries were finishing her homework and convincing her parents to let her watch one more hour of television. David followed her a few minutes later, finding her sitting on the stone bench under the 100-year-old cherry tree. Are you okay? He asked, sitting next to her. I'm great, she lied, watching the leaves sway in the afternoon breeze. Sarah, I know sometimes your family can... Sarah felt intense. But they only care about you. They care about the version of me they want me to be, she corrected. Not about who I really am. David was silent for a moment, fiddling with a leaf that had fallen on the bench. And who are you really? The question caught her off guard. It was the second time in a few days that someone forced her to confront this fundamental question. I don't know, she admitted, but I know I'm not the person who sits at a table listening to others decide my life. No one is deciding your life, Sarah. We're just planning our future together. Our future or the future that your family and mine expect from us. David turned to face her, confusion in his brown eyes. Since when do you question our plans? We've always talked about everything. The wedding, the house, the kids. Did we talk or did you talk and I just agreed? The question hung in the air like an accusation. David was a good man, Sarah knew that. A successful civil engineer, loyal, caring in his own way, always present. But lately, she found herself questioning if good was enough, if the security he offered compensated for the feeling that she was slowly suffocating. Sarah, what's happening to you? You've been strange since Thursday. Did that work dinner affect you in some way? The mention of the dinner with Michael made her heart race involuntarily. It was just work, David. Then why don't you want to talk about our wedding anymore? Why are you questioning plans we made together? Sarah stood up, walking to the fence that separated the neighbor's yard. Because maybe those plans are no longer enough for me. Not enough? David's voice carried a mix of hurt and disbelief. Sarah, we've been together for 5 years. We've built a life together. We have plans, shared dreams or dreams you assumed I shared. David approached, placing his hands on her shoulders. Sarah, look at me. We're good together. We complete each other. You make me want to be a better person, and I give you stability, security. And what if I don't want just stability? What if I want passion, adventure, the feeling of being alive? Passion fades, Sarah. What we have is real, lasting. David's words echoed in her mind, painfully contrasting with the conversation she had with Michael. Two men, two completely different visions of life and relationships. One offered security, the other the promise of awakening. David, she said softly, turning to face him, I need some time to think. Time to think about what? About us? About everything. About who I am. About what I want from life. About whether I'm being true to myself. The expression on David's face shifted from confusion to something close to panic. Sarah, you're scaring me. Is this about that promotion? Because if it's a work issue, we can talk. Maybe you don't have to accept it. It's not about accepting or not accepting the promotion. David, it's about accepting or not accepting the person I might become. They returned inside in silence, finding the family still gathered in the living room, discussing the upcoming birthday of Patriarch James. Sarah participated mechanically in the conversation, smiling at the appropriate moments, agreeing with the plans, but her mind was far away. When they finally said goodbye and returned to the apartment they shared in Chelsea, David tried to resume the conversation a few times, but Sarah claimed fatigue and retreated to the bedroom. Lying on the bed, with David sleeping beside her, she picked up her phone and reread the message Michael had sent on Friday. "Sarah, I hope to hear back from you about the project by Monday, but mainly, I hope you make the right decision for you, not for others." Staring at the ceiling in the dark, Sarah realized that for the first time in a long time, perhaps for the first time in her life, she was being forced to choose between being the person she had always been and the person she could become. And that terrified her as much as it excited her. Monday arrived, laden with the typical humidity of a New York summer, making clothes cling to her body even before leaving the house. Sarah arrived at the office at 7 in the morning, 2 hours before the normal workday, hoping to find the environment empty to organize her thoughts before making the decision that would change her life. The 23rd floor of Tech Global Innovations was shrouded in a grayish gloom, illuminated only by the city lights filtering through the panoramic windows. Sitting at her desk, Sarah flipped through the Nexus project documents that Michael had given her for the third time. Each page revealed an ambition that made her heart race. Mentorship programs for women in leadership positions, corporate daycare with bilingual education, partnerships with public universities for scholarships, sustainability projects that would make Tech Global the first carbon-neutral technology company in the country. "You got here early today." Jessica's familiar voice made her look up from the papers. Her best friend stood at the entrance of the room, elegant as always, in a charcoal grey suit that accentuated her platinum blonde hair. But Sarah noticed something different in Jessica's gaze, a subtle tension she couldn't identify. "I couldn't sleep well," Sarah admitted, closing the folder. "And you? What are you doing here so early?" Jessica approached, placing a steaming cup of coffee on Sarah's desk. "I brought your favorite coffee, from that place on Madison Avenue that you love." She paused, as if carefully choosing her words. "And I came because we need to talk." "About what?" "About your meeting with Michael on Thursday." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "How do you—" "Sarah, I've worked at this company for 8 years. I know this place better than my own home." Jessica sat in the chair across from the desk, crossing her legs with studied elegance. "And most importantly, I've known you for 15 years. I know when something is consuming you from the inside." "It was just a work dinner, Sarah." "At Le Gourmet?" Sarah raised a perfectly arched eyebrow. "Marina, Le Gourmet is not a place for work dinners. It's where powerful men take women they want to impress." Marina took a sip of her coffee, buying time to organize her thoughts. The bitter, rich flavor of the Ethiopian bean helped her focus. "Michael offered me a promotion. The leadership of an important project." "What kind of project?" Marina hesitated for a moment, then decided to be honest. After all, Sarah was her best friend and the company's lawyer. If anyone could understand the professional implications, it was her. "It's called Nexus, a complete organizational transformation initiative. Social responsibility, sustainability, gender equality." Sarah listened in silence as Marina explained the details, but her expression grew increasingly grim. "Marina," she said when her friend finished, "that sounds too good to be true." "What do you mean?" "Think about it. Why would Michael choose you to lead something so important? You're competent, yes, but there are directors with more experience, more internal political influence." Marina felt a pang of irritation. "Maybe because he recognizes my potential. Maybe because he trusts me. Or maybe because he has other interests at play." Sarah leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Marina, you're a beautiful, intelligent woman in a stable relationship for 5 years. To a man like Michael, you represent the perfect challenge." "Sarah, that's ridiculous. We're talking about work. We're talking about power. And men like Michael Anderson don't do anything without calculating all angles." Sarah opened her Prada bag, pulling out a tablet. "I did some research on him over the weekend." "What kind of research?" "The kind a lawyer does when her best friend is being seduced by someone powerful." Sarah swiped her finger across the screen, opening a series of documents. Michael took over the company 3 years ago after his father's sudden death. Before that, he spent 10 years finding himself in Europe. He's known as a womanizer, has been married twice. Sarah, stop it. And has a history of getting involved with employees. The last one was fired under murky circumstances 6 months ago. Marina felt her blood run cold. Who was fired? I couldn't find out the name yet, but I'm investigating. Sarah closed the tablet, studying her friend's face. Marina, promise me you'll be careful. Men like him are sophisticated predators. They don't attack directly. They seduce, involve, make you believe the choice is yours. You're being paranoid. I'm being protective. There's a difference. Sarah stood up, smoothing her suit skirt. And there's one more thing you need to know. What is it? David reached out to me yesterday. He's worried about your behavior since Thursday. He asked if I knew anything. Marina closed her eyes, feeling the weight of all the pressures converging on her. Family pressuring for marriage, David questioning her changes, Sarah warning about dangers, and in the midst of it all, a project that represented everything she had always dreamed of professionally. What did you tell him? That it was a problem between you two. But Marina, Sarah paused, placing her hand on her friend's shoulder. David is a good man. Don't make a mistake you'll regret for the rest of your life. After Sarah left, Marina was alone with her thoughts and the hum of the air conditioning. By 9 o'clock, the office began to fill with the arrival of other employees. Morning greetings, conversations about the weekend, the aroma of coffee and pastries someone had brought from the bakery. At 10:30, Michael's secretary called. Ms. Marina, Mr. Anderson would like to see you in his office when it's convenient. Marina looked at the outline of the phone, knowing the moment of decision had arrived. She checked her makeup in the compact mirror, adjusted the navy blazer she had carefully chosen, and walked through the corridors toward the top floor of the building. Michael's office occupied the entire northeast corner of the building, with windows offering a 180-degree view of the city. New York stretched to the horizon like a living organism, pulsing with the energy of 12 million people chasing their dreams and nightmares. The decor was minimalist yet sophisticated. Italian designer furniture, a whole wall lined with management and philosophy books, and some contemporary American art. Michael was on the phone when she arrived, speaking in English with someone who seemed to be an American investor. He gestured for her to sit, finishing the conversation a few minutes later. Sorry, international investors don't respect time zones. He hung up the phone and directed all his attention to her. So, Marina, what is your decision? She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. Accept the position. The smile that lit up Michael's face was genuine, almost childlike. Excellent. I knew you would make the right decision, but I have conditions. Of course. What are they? First, I want total autonomy over the team. I choose who works with me. Agreed. Second, direct reports to you, no intermediaries. Perfect. And third, she paused, gathering courage, our relationship is strictly professional. What happened on Thursday? What happened on Thursday? Michael leaned forward, genuinely curious. The intimacy of the conversation. It can't happen again. Michael studied her face for a long moment, then smiled with a tenderness that completely disarmed her. Marina, can I be honest with you? She nodded. On Thursday, for the first time in a long time, I had a real conversation with someone. Not about numbers, strategies, or corporate policies. About life, dreams, about who we are behind the roles we occupy. He stood up, walking to the window. If that made you uncomfortable, I apologize. It wasn't my intention. Michael, but I won't apologize for recognizing in you someone special. Someone who deserves more than to accept crumbs from life. Marina felt her heart race dangerously. Michael, I have a fiancé. I know, and I will respect that. He turned to face her. But I also won't pretend that I don't feel a connection between us. An affinity that goes beyond work. That can't happen. What can't happen? Feeling? Being honest about what we feel? He returned to his chair, but kept his eyes fixed on her. Sarah, I'm not asking for anything but honesty. With me and, most importantly, with yourself. The silence that followed was charged with electric tension. Sarah could hear the muffled sound of traffic below, the hum of the air conditioning, her own rapid breathing. "When do I start?" she finally asked. "Today, your first task is to form a team of 5 people. People who share our vision, who aren't afraid to challenge the status quo." And the official announcement: "We'll have a meeting with all the directors tomorrow morning." "But Sarah," he paused, carefully choosing his words, "be prepared for resistance. Not everyone will be happy with your promotion." "Why?" "Because you represent change, and change always scares those who benefit from the current system." Sarah left the room, feeling as if she had crossed an invisible Rubicon. She didn't know if she was making the best decision of her life or walking toward a foreseen disaster. But for the first time in a long time, she felt alive. What she didn't know was that 3 floors below, Jessica was watching her ex-husband, Marcus Brown, get out of a black car at the entrance of the building. And Marcus wasn't there by chance. The conference room on the 24th floor was charged with an almost palpable tension when Sarah entered accompanied by Michael the following morning. 8 directors, 7 men and 1 woman were seated around the oval mahogany table, their expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed skepticism. The aroma of strong coffee mingled with the scent of leather from the imported furniture and a light fragrance of expensive perfumes, creating an atmosphere of corporate power that made Sarah feel simultaneously excited and intimidated. "Good morning, everyone," Michael began, positioning himself at the head of the table. "Before we start the regular meeting, I have an important announcement to make." Robert Smith, the 58-year-old CFO and a veteran of the company since its founding, adjusted his gold-rimmed glasses with a gesture that Sarah had learned to recognize as a sign of disapproval. His completely white hair, always styled with gel, and the pinstripe suit he wore religiously gave him the air of a conservative banker that intimidated even the most experienced employees. "Sarah Johnson will assume the position of Director of Special Projects, leading a new initiative that will revolutionize our corporate culture," Michael announced, gesturing for Sarah to stand beside him. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah could feel 8 pairs of eyes dissecting her, evaluating every detail of her appearance, trying to decipher how a mere HR manager had secured such a strategic position. "Special projects?" questioned Beatrice Johnson, the only woman on the board besides Sarah. At 45, Beatrice had climbed the corporate hierarchy with nails and teeth, developing a reputation for toughness that rivaled her male colleagues. Her red hair cut in a modern bob, and the black suit she wore like armor reflected her personality, elegant but ruthless. "What kind of projects are we talking about?" Sarah took a deep breath, recalling the advice Michael had given her the night before. Be firm, but not confrontational. Show knowledge, but not arrogance. "The Nexus project represents a complete transformation of our corporate responsibility," Sarah began, her voice sounding firmer than she felt. "We will implement programs for inclusion, environmental sustainability, and social responsibility that will position Tech Global as a national leader in ethical innovation." "Ethical innovation?" Robert laughed disdainfully, the sound echoing through the room like a bark. "Miss Sarah, with all due respect, that sounds like talk to impress NGOs and journalists. Our focus should be on the numbers from the last quarter, which, by the way, fell below expectations." "Exactly why we need to innovate," Sarah retorted, feeling an unexpected courage swell in her chest. "Companies that do not adapt to new social demands fall behind. Our competitors are already investing heavily in corporate responsibility. And how much will this corporate responsibility cost?" asked Charles Anderson, the operations director, a burly 52-year-old man whose red face betrayed high blood pressure and constant stress. "Because I already have difficulties keeping operational costs within budget." Michael intervened with the smoothness of someone who completely masters the art of corporate politics. Charles, the initial investments will be offset by tax benefits and increased brand valuation. Studies show that companies with strong social responsibility have stocks that appreciate 40% more than the market average. Studies done by whom? Beatrice questioned, leaning forward like a predator identifying prey. And what are Ms. Sarah's credentials to lead a project of this magnitude? Because, as far as I know, her experience is limited to managing employee benefits and resolving labor disputes. Sarah felt her cheeks heat up, but forced herself to maintain composure. My experience in human resources has given me a unique insight into what truly motivates our employees. I know where the real problems in the company lie because I deal with them daily. Real problems. Robert shifted in his chair, clearly irritated. What real problems? A turnover rate of 35% per year, especially among more qualified employees. 3 labor lawsuits for gender discrimination in the last 6 months. Constant complaints about a lack of growth opportunities for women and minorities. Sarah enumerated the data from memory, feeling more confident with each word. These are problems that cost money and harm our reputation in the market. A murmur of discomfort rippled across the table. Sarah realized she had touched on sensitive points, issues that everyone knew but preferred to ignore. Moreover, she continued, seizing the moment, we have a unique opportunity to access special credit lines from the BNDES for companies with sustainability projects. We're talking about up to $50 million in financing with subsidized interest rates. Roberto's eyes sparkled with interest, but his expression remained skeptical. And do you have experience negotiating with BNDES? No. But I have experience learning quickly and surrounding myself with the right people for each challenge. Anthony Smith, the technology director and the youngest in the group at 38, finally broke his silence. Vin, with perpetually messy brown hair and an unshaven beard that gave him the appearance of a perpetually busy programmer, he usually avoided corporate political battles. Actually, he said, adjusting his thin-framed glasses, Sarah is right about the market trend. Our corporate clients are increasingly demanding sustainable practices. We lost 2 major contracts last quarter because we couldn't meet the client's social responsibility requirements. Which contracts? Charles asked, clearly surprised. The one with Petrobras and the central bank. Both included clauses about labor and environmental practices that we failed to comply with. Michael seized the opportunity. That's exactly why the Nexus project is strategic, not just ethical. We're losing business by not keeping up with market changes. Beatrice tapped her perfectly manicured nails on the table, a nervous tick that Sarah had learned to associate with growing irritation. All right, assuming the project makes financial sense, why Sarah? Why not someone with more experience in managing complex projects? The question hung in the air like a poisoned spear. Sarah knew this was the fundamental question, not her technical ability, but the perception of how she had secured the position. Because Sarah understands people, Michael replied, his voice carrying an authority that silenced the room. And at the end of the day, all organizational transformation is about people, about getting individuals with different backgrounds, motivations, and fears to work together towards a common goal. Moreover, Sarah added, feeling the need to defend herself personally, I accept that there is much to learn. That's why my first task will be to form a multidisciplinary team. I want people who complement my skills, not just agree with me. Roberto flipped through some papers in the folder in front of him, clearly looking for ammunition for further questioning. And what will the timeline be? Because if we're going to invest significant resources in this, I need clear deadlines and goals. 6 months for structuring and the first measurable results, Sarah replied promptly. 12 months for full implementation of the first phase. Very ambitious, Beatrice murmured. Maybe, but big changes require big ambitions. The meeting extended for another 40 minutes, with inquiries about budget, timeline, team, and success indicators. Sarah answered each question with a mix of technical knowledge and honesty, about her limitations that gradually earned her the respect, if not enthusiasm, of most present. When they finally left the room, Michael lightly touched her arm. "You did very well. Better than I expected. Thank you, but I felt some weren't convinced. Roberto and Beatrice will never be convinced. They see any change as a threat to the status quo that benefits them." Michael paused, looking around to ensure they weren't overheard. "But you won over Anthony, and that's important. He has real technical influence." Returning to her new office, a much larger space on the 22nd floor overlooking Central Park, Sarah found an unpleasant surprise. Beatrice Johnson was sitting in her chair, flipping through some documents that were on the table. "Can I help you with something?" Sarah asked, keeping her voice polite but firm. Beatrice slowly lifted her eyes, a cold smile on her lips. "Just familiarizing myself with the project details. As board colleagues, I imagine we'll share a lot of information." "Of course. But perhaps next time you could ask for permission before entering my office." "Your office?" Beatrice laughed, a crystal clear and dangerous sound. "Sarah, dear, you still don't understand how things work at this hierarchical level. There are no your offices. There are only temporary positions we occupy while we are useful." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "What are you trying to say?" Beatrice gracefully stood, smoothing her suit skirt. "I'm saying that meteoric rises are often followed by equally spectacular falls, especially when they are based on, let's say, unconventional criteria. If you're implying something about my promotion, I'm not implying anything. I'm just observing that a 42-year-old woman with no experience in strategic leadership doesn't usually get promoted to director overnight." Beatrice headed for the door, stopping in the doorway. "Unless you offer something beyond technical competence." After Beatrice left, Sarah was alone in her new office, trying to process what had just happened. For the first time since accepting the promotion, she wondered if she had underestimated the dangers awaiting her in this new world of power and corporate politics. Her phone rang, interrupting her dark thoughts. It was a message from David. "Honey, how about we go out for dinner tonight? I want to celebrate your promotion. Love you." Looking at the message, Sarah realized she hadn't yet told David about her decision to accept the new position. And for the first time, the prospect of dining with her fiancé felt more like an obligation than a pleasure. The Olive Tree Bistro, with its table set under the shade of the century-old olive tree that gave it its name, offered a romantic atmosphere that cruelly contrasted with the tense mood between Sarah and David. The golden lights hanging from the tree's branches created a play of shadows dancing across his face as he tried to process the news of his girlfriend's unexpected promotion. "Director," David repeated for the third time, mechanically cutting the fillet he had ordered but barely touched. "Sarah, you jumped 3 hierarchical levels at once. How did this happen?" Sarah nervously fiddled with her rings. In her fingers, a habit she had developed as a child that resurfaced whenever she felt cornered. "Michael recognized my potential. The Nexus project needs someone with a humanitarian vision, and he believes I am the right person." "Michael?" David stopped cutting the meat, fixing his brown eyes on her with an unusual intensity. "Since when do you two call each other by your first names?" "David, he asked us to drop the formalities. It's normal among executives." "Normal?" He repeated the word as if it had a bitter taste. "Sarah, in 15 years of my career, I've never seen anything normal about a promotion of this magnitude happening so quickly." Sarah felt irritation grow in her chest. "Are you doubting my capability?" "I'm not doubting your capability. I'm questioning the methods." "What methods?" David placed his cutlery on the plate, leaning back in his chair with an expression she had never seen before, a mix of hurt and distrust that made her feel like a stranger in front of the man she had shared her life with for 5 years. "Sarah, you come home on Thursday after a completely different work dinner. For the last 3 days, you've barely spoken to me, questioning our wedding plans. And now you show up with a promotion that will completely change our lives. Without consulting me, without even letting me know you were being considered for something like this." "I didn't know I was being considered." It was a surprise for me too. Was it really? His voice carried a bitterness that cut deeper than any shout. Because to me, it seems like there are things happening in your life that you don't want to share with me. Sarah looked around the restaurant, observing other couples animatedly talking, laughing, sharing intimacies. When did she and David stop having real conversations? When did they start behaving like two polite strangers sharing the same space? David, she said softly, reaching her hand across the table to touch his. I know the situation is strange, but this is an incredible opportunity for me. For us. For us? He did not reciprocate the touch. Sarah, this promotion means more responsibility, more hours worked, more travel. How is this good for us? Financially. It's not about money. His voice rose a pitch, causing a few people at nearby tables to glance over discreetly. He took a deep breath, lowering his voice again. Sarah, our plan was to get married, buy a bigger house, have kids. How does this promotion fit into those plans? The question hung in the air like a blade. Sarah realized she hadn't thought about it, about how to reconcile the new position with the plans they had made together. Or maybe, on a deeper level of her mind, she already knew she didn't want the same plans anymore. Maybe we can postpone some things, she said vaguely. Postpone? Sarah, you're 42. I'm 44. If we want to have kids, we can't keep postponing indefinitely. And what if I don't want to have kids anymore? The question slipped from her lips before she could reprimand herself. David looked at her as if she had confessed to a crime. What do you mean by that? I mean that maybe I've changed my mind about some things. About having kids? Sarah, we've always talked about this. It has always been part of our plans. Those were your plans, David. You assumed they were mine too. The silence that followed was heavy, laden with years of unexamined assumptions and unfulfilled dreams. Sarah could hear the murmur of other conversations, the clinking of cutlery, the distant sound of traffic on 42nd Street, but everything felt muffled by the magnitude of what she had just admitted. I don't understand what's happening to you, David finally said, his voice heavy with a sadness that made Sarah's heart tighten. It's like you woke up one day and decided that our life together is no longer enough. It's not about our life being enough or not. Then what is it about? About him? Him who? Your new boss, Michael. Sarah felt the blood rush to her cheeks. David, that's ridiculous. Is it? Because Jessica called me today. The words hit Sarah like a punch to the stomach. Jessica called you? She was worried. She said you've been acting strange since Thursday, that something is happening at the company that she can't quite identify. David leaned forward, lowering his voice. Sarah, she told me about the research she did on Michael, about his history with female employees. Sarah felt a mix of anger and betrayal burning in her chest. Jessica had no right to tell you that. She has the right to worry about her best friend, just like I have the right to worry about my fiancé. There's nothing to worry about, is there not? David pulled out his phone from his pocket, fiddling with the screen for a few seconds before showing it to her. Then explain this to me. On the phone screen, Sarah saw a photo posted on Tech Global Innovations' official Instagram account. It was an image from the company party, showing her and Michael talking near the event hall windows. The proximity between them, the way he leaned in to speak in her ear, the focused expression on her face, everything contributed to creating an image of intimacy that made Sarah choke. David, that photo means nothing. We were just talking about work. At a party, alone, with him whispering in your ear. David put the phone away, his voice carrying a growing bitterness. Sarah, I'm not an idiot. I can recognize when something is happening between two people. Nothing is happening. Then why are you defending yourself as if there is? The question left her speechless. Why was she defending herself? Why did she feel the need to deny something that deep down she knew to be true? That there was indeed a connection between her and Michael that transcended the professional realm. David, she said softly, can I be honest with you? You? Please. I don't know what's happening to me. I know I'm confused, questioning things that once seemed certain. She paused, carefully choosing her words. But this isn't about Michael. It's about me. Are you sure? Sarah hesitated for a very long second. I am. But as she spoke the words, a part of her knew she was lying. To David and to herself. They finished dinner in relative silence, each lost in their own thoughts. David insisted on paying the bill, a gesture Sarah usually considered gallant, but that night it felt more like a display of control than courtesy. On the way home, stuck in traffic on Fifth Avenue, David finally broke the silence. Sarah, I need you to be honest with me about one thing. What? Do you still want to marry me? The question was simple, direct, but carried the weight of 5 years of relationship and all the plans they had built together. Sarah looked out the window, watching the city lights outside, people walking on the sidewalks, each carrying their own dilemmas and dreams. I don't know, she whispered, so softly she could barely hear her own voice. David didn't respond, but she saw his hands tighten on the steering wheel and a solitary tear roll down his cheek. When they got home, David went straight to the bathroom, claiming exhaustion. Sarah stayed in the living room, sitting on the couch they had chosen together 2 years earlier, trying to understand how her life had become so complicated in such a short time. Her phone vibrated with a message. It was from Michael. Sarah, I know it's late, but we need to talk urgently. I found something about the project that you need to know before tomorrow.
Can I call?
Sarah glanced toward the bathroom, where she could hear the sound of the shower. Then she typed her response, "You can call." The phone rang less than a minute later. Sarah, sorry to bother you at home, but this can't wait. What happened? I found out who the employee was that created the original project. The project that served as the basis for Nexus. Sarah felt her heart race.
Who was it?
Jessica Taylor. She worked as an external consultant here for 8 months, developing the entire concept of the Corporate Social Responsibility Program. And she was fired a week after presenting the final project. Why was she fired? Officially? Cost-cutting unofficially? Michael paused. Sarah, she discovered financial irregularities. Misappropriation of funds, inflated contracts, bribery schemes involving some of our directors. Sarah felt as if the ground had opened beneath her feet. What kind of irregularities? This needs to be discussed in person. It's not safe to talk about it over the phone. His voice carried an urgency that frightened her. Sarah, can you meet me tomorrow morning? Before we get to the office? Michael, this is scaring me. It should be. Because if Jessica was right, and I believe she was, you weren't promoted just for your skills. You were chosen to be the public face of a project that may be used to cover up crimes. The line went silent, with only the sound of their breathing echoing through the connection. Sarah could hear David turning off the shower, and she realized her life had just become even more complicated than she imagined. Sarah, are you still there? I am, she whispered. Where do we meet? The 24-hour cafe on Madison Avenue was almost empty at 6 in the morning on Wednesday, with only a few early risers having their first coffee before work and some young people returning from night parties. Sarah arrived 15 minutes early, choosing a table at the back of the establishment, away from the windows facing the busy street. Her hands trembled slightly as she stirred the sugar into the coffee she had ordered more, out of nervousness than thirst. Michael arrived promptly at 6:30, wearing dark jeans and a navy polo shirt that made him look younger and more approachable than his usual executive suits. But there was a tension in his movements, a subtle paranoia in the way he scanned the environment before sitting down, which made Sarah realize the gravity of the situation. "Thank you for coming," he said, ordering an espresso from the sleepy waitress who approached. "I know this is strange, but I needed to make sure we wouldn't be interrupted." "Michael, you're scaring me. What exactly are we talking about?" He opened a leather folder he had brought, pulling out a series of documents and photographs. Jessica Taylor, 35 years old, graduated in business administration from NYU, specialist in corporate social responsibility. She was hired as an external consultant last January to develop a sustainability program. Sarah examined the photo attached to the resume. A brunette woman with green eyes, a confident smile, and a professional appearance. There was something familiar about her, but Sarah couldn't pinpoint what. For 8 months, she worked directly with some directors of the company, including Robert Smith and Beatrice Johnson. The project she developed was practically identical to what I presented to you as Nexus. Practically identical, or exactly identical? Michael hesitated for a moment. Exactly identical. I copied her work, Sarah, word for word, number for number. The admission hit her like a bucket of cold water. Why? Because it was brilliant. It was exactly what the company needed, and Jessica had done all the research, feasibility analysis, and financial projections. He took a sip of his coffee, his hands also trembling slightly. But she discovered something during the process that made her question the true motivations behind the project. What kind of thing? Michael spread some papers across the table, bank statements, contracts, printed emails. Tech Global has a series of contracts with third-party companies for cleaning, security, and maintenance services, contracts that are automatically renewed every year without bidding. Sarah studied the documents, noticing values that seemed inflated. And what's the problem with that? The problem is that these outsourced companies are owned by family and friends of some of our directors, and the prices charged are significantly above market rates. Michael pointed to a specific contract. This cleaning company charges 40% more than the competition. This security one, 60% more. That's corruption, contract steering, misuse of company resources for personal gain. Michael gathered the papers, nervously looking around. Jessica discovered this while analyzing operational costs to calculate the budget for the sustainability project. Sarah felt a knot form in her stomach. And what did she do with this information? Initially, she tried to talk to Robert Smith, since he was her direct contact. Robert said they were established practices, and that she should focus only on the project she was hired for. But she wasn't satisfied with that. No, Jessica began to investigate on her own, documenting everything. She discovered that the scheme has existed for at least 5 years and involves millions of dollars being siphoned off. Michael pulled out another document, a detailed spreadsheet with calculations. According to her estimates, the company lost approximately $8 million in the last 3 years, just in overinflated contracts. Sarah studied the numbers, feeling a mix of indignation and fear grow in her chest. Michael, if this is true, why didn't you report it? Why didn't you take it to the authorities? Because I didn't have enough evidence. And because... He hesitated, clearly struggling with something internal, because I benefited from the system myself. How so? My consulting firm, the one I maintained before taking over the presidency of Tech Global Innovations, provided services to the company for years. Services that may have been unnecessary, costs that may have been inflated. His voice carried genuine guilt. When my father died and I took control, I discovered the whole scheme. I found out he was involved, that several directors were involved, and that I, even unknowingly, was too. Sarah leaned back in her chair, trying to process the magnitude of what she was hearing. And Jessica? Jessica finished her project and delivered a complete report, both on the sustainability program and on the irregularities she discovered. A week later, she was informed that her services would no longer be needed, and she accepted that quietly. No, she threatened to make her findings public. That's when. Michael paused, as if the next words were particularly difficult to say. That's when what? That's when Robert and Beatrice approached me. They said there was an uncontrolled employee making unfounded accusations that could harm the company's reputation. They suggested I talk to her. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. And did you talk to her? I did. I offered her a generous financial settlement in exchange for a confidentiality agreement. I said the irregularities she found were due to mismanagement, not intentional corruption, and that we were working to correct them. And did she accept? Initially, no, but then... Michael paused, looking directly into Sarah's eyes. Then strange things started happening in her life. What kind of things? Car troubles, flat tires repeatedly, dead battery. Anonymous calls in the middle of the night. Someone broke into her apartment but didn't steal anything, just rummaged through her work papers. Sarah felt a wave of nausea. Michael, are you saying you intimidated her? I didn't intimidate anyone, but when those incidents started happening, I realized there were forces at play that I couldn't control. His voice carried a mix of anger and frustration. That's when I understood the problem was much bigger than I imagined. And Jessica? Jessica ended up accepting the deal. She signed the confidentiality agreement, received a $2 million settlement, and disappeared. She moved to the countryside, from what I heard. Sarah looked at the documents scattered on the table, feeling as if she were being pulled into a black hole from which she couldn't escape. Michael, why are you telling me this? Because when I offered you the leadership of the Nexus project, I believed I could use the situation to clean the company from the inside out, to use you as a genuine ally to expose and correct the irregularities. Use? The word came out with more venom than Sarah intended. So I'm just a tool in your personal crusade? No. Sarah, you don't understand. Michael extended his hand across the table, almost touching hers. When I started to investigate more deeply, when I began to piece together the puzzle, I realized I couldn't do this alone. I need someone with integrity, someone who isn't compromised by the current system. But you put me in an extremely dangerous position without warning me of the risks. Because if I had told you everything from the start, you would never have accepted, and I needed you within the power structure so we could act. Sarah stood up abruptly, grabbing her bag. Michael, this is madness. You're asking me to get involved in a corporate war against people who apparently have no scruples. Sarah, wait. He stood up too, following her to the cafe door. I know it sounds scary, but you're not alone in this. And think about what we could achieve if we really cleaned the company. The Nexus project could become a reality. It could transform thousands of lives. And what if we don't succeed? What if the same thing happens to me that happened to Jessica? Michael stopped on the sidewalk, looking directly into her eyes. I won't let that happen. Sarah, I know I made mistakes. I know I should have been honest from the start. But I promise I will protect you. How can you promise that if you admitted there are forces you can't control? The question hung in the air as they stared at each other on the busy sidewalk of Madison Avenue. Sarah could see the vulnerability. In his eyes, the guilt and fear mixed with a determination that was both admirable and terrifying. Sarah, he finally said, I know I don't have the right to ask this, but I need you to trust me just a little longer. Enough time for us to gather solid evidence and expose everything the right way. And what if I say no? What if I resign right now and walk away from all of this? Michael hesitated for a moment. Then they win. Robert, Beatrice, and anyone else involved continue siphoning money. The company remains a den of corruption, and people like Jessica continue to be silenced. Sarah looked at the hustle and bustle of the city around her. People, heading to work, chasing their dreams and obligations, oblivious to the drama unfolding on the sidewalk. Part of her just wanted to escape, return to her simple life as an HR manager, marry David, and pretend none of this had ever happened. But another part, a part that had been growing inside her since the first conversation with Michael, whispered that maybe this was her chance to truly make a difference, to be the person she had always dreamed of being. I need to think, she finally said. How much time do you need? I don't know. But Michael... She paused. If I'm going to trust you, I need total honesty. No more secrets, no more hidden information. Can I count on that? You can, he replied, but there was something in his eyes that made Sarah question whether he could truly keep that promise. As she walked back to the car, Sarah had no way of knowing that, at that very moment, 2 blocks away, Jessica Brown was being photographed entering the office of James Brown, her ex-husband and a lawyer specializing in money laundering. The law firm, Brown and Associates, occupied 3 floors of a commercial building in the financial district overlooking the Hudson River, with decor that screamed financial success, fine wood furniture, original artwork, and an almost religious silence that only money could buy. Jessica Brown walked through the familiar hallways with the ease of someone who had helped build that empire, even though the divorce had officially ended her involvement in the business. James Brown was waiting for her in his private office, a 50-year-old man who maintained his physique through expensive personal trainers and his youthful appearance through discreet aesthetic procedures. His grey hair was always cut by the same barber on Madison Avenue, and his tailored suits came from an Italian tailor that catered only to select clients. Despite the tumultuous divorce 2 years prior, he had promptly answered Jessica's phone call the night before. "Jessica," he said, rising to greet her with a kiss on the cheek that she tolerated more than appreciated. "You look beautiful. Freedom suits you." "Thank you, James. And thank you for seeing me on such short notice." "For you, always." He gestured for her to sit in the Italian leather armchair in front of his desk. "Coffee, tea?" "Something stronger." "Coffee is fine." Jessica settled in, crossing her legs elegantly and observing the man she had been married to for 12 years. "James, I need information about Tech Global Innovations." The expression on his face changed subtly, his eyes narrowing almost imperceptibly. "Tech Global? The tech company on Fifth Avenue?" "Exactly. Specifically about accounting practices, cash flow, any irregularities that might exist." James poured coffee from an elegant thermos, his movements deliberately slow as he processed the request. "May I ask why your sudden interest in Tech Global?" "My best friend works there. She just got promoted to director of an important project, and I have some concerns." "What kind of concerns?" Jessica took a deep breath, carefully choosing her words. "Sarah has always been very naive when it comes to corporate politics. I'm afraid she's being used in some power play she doesn't fully understand." James took a sip of coffee, studying his ex-wife's face with the attention of a lawyer skilled in detecting lies. "And you think I might have information about Tech Global because you've always known everything that happens in the corporate market in New York, and because..." She hesitated. "Because I know you have clients that provide services to large companies like Tech Global." "Jessica, you know I can't discuss matters related to my clients. I'm not asking you to violate confidentiality. I'm asking for guidance." "As a friend," James laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Friend? Jessica, you left me, remember? You said you couldn't stand being married to someone who sold his soul for money." "James, no, let me finish." He stood up, walking to the window that offered a panoramic view of the city. "You judged me for years for working with questionable clients, for taking cases that, let's say, exploited legal loopholes. And now you come here asking for exactly the kind of information those relationships provide." Jessica felt her cheeks flush. "This is different." "Is it? How?" "Because it's not about money. It's about protecting Sarah." James turned to face her, a cynical smile on his lips. "It's always been about protecting someone, hasn't it? First your clients when you were a labor lawyer, then Sarah, now Sarah again." He paused. "Have you ever wondered if your protections are really necessary, or if they are just ways to maintain control?" The question hit Jessica like a punch. "What are you insinuating?" "I'm insinuating that maybe Sarah is more capable of taking care of herself than you imagine. and that perhaps your concerns have more to do with your own fears than with the real dangers she faces. Jessica stood up, grabbing her purse. It was a mistake to come here. Jessica, wait. James returned to the desk, opening a drawer and pulling out a folder. You want information about Tech Global? I'll give you information. He opened the folder, revealing documents, photographs, and newspaper clippings. Tech Global Innovations has been under investigation for 6 months by a task force from the FBI specializing in financial crimes. Jessica felt the blood run cold in her veins. How do you know this? Because I represent one of the outsourced companies that provides services for them. A company that, according to investigators, may be involved in money laundering schemes. Money and contract overpricing. Oh my God! The investigation began after an anonymous tip was made 8 months ago. Someone provided investigators with detailed documents regarding financial irregularities, directed contracts, and misappropriation of funds. Jessica sat heavily back in her chair. Who made the tip? That hasn't been revealed, but according to my sources, it was someone from within the company. Someone with access to privileged information. James flipped through some documents. The task force is building a solid case. They estimate that the operation will be launched in the coming weeks. And Sarah, could she be involved? If she just got promoted to a leadership position, it's possible. Intentionally or not? James closed the folder, fixing his eyes on his ex-wife. Jessica, do you still have feelings for me? The question caught her off guard. James, this has nothing to do with... It has everything to do with it. Because I'm going to make you a proposal, and I need to know what your real motivations are for accepting or refusing. What kind of proposal? James leaned over the table, lowering his voice. I can protect Sarah. I can use my contacts to ensure she isn't seen as guilty when the operation is launched. But in return, I want something. What? I want you back. With me, in the office, in our life together. Jessica stared at him in shock. James, you can't be serious. I'm completely serious. Jessica, these 2 years without you have been the worst of my life. I know I made mistakes. I know I let myself be seduced by money and power. But I can change. James, I can protect Sarah. I can use all my influence to ensure she gets out of this situation unscathed. But I need you by my side. Jessica stood up again, walking to the window. Down below, the city pulsed with its frenetic energy, millions of people struggling to survive and thrive. How many of them, she wondered, found themselves in situations where they had to choose between personal values and protecting the people they loved. Sarah doesn't even know I'm here, she finally said. She doesn't need to know. You would simply ensure she makes the right decisions in the coming weeks. That she distances herself from Tech Global Innovations before it's too late. And what if she doesn't want to distance herself? Then you make her want to. Jessica, you know Sarah better than anyone. You know exactly which buttons to push to make her question her decisions. The suggestion made Jessica feel nauseous. You're asking me to manipulate my best friend. I'm asking you to save her from a situation that could destroy her life. Jessica was silent for a long moment, watching the movement below. A part of her knew that James was right about the dangers Sarah faced. But another part recognized that accepting his proposal would mean not only betraying her friend's trust, but also compromising her own integrity. I need to think, she finally said. How much time do you need? A few days. James moved closer, stopping behind her and placing his hands on her shoulders. Jessica, I know our separation was hard. I know I hurt you, but I still love you. And if there's a chance to save our family and protect Sarah at the same time, our family. Jessica turned to face him. James, we don't have a family. We never managed to have children, remember? We can try again. We can adopt. We can build the family we always dreamed of. The pain she saw in his eyes was genuine, but Jessica also recognized the subtle manipulation behind his words. James had always been a master at using people's emotional vulnerabilities to get what he wanted. I'll think about your proposal, she repeated, heading for the door. Jessica? She turned around. Don't take too long to decide. The investigations are speeding up, and if Sarah doesn't distance herself from Tech Global Innovations soon, it may be too late to protect her. Leaving the office, Jessica felt as if she was sinking into quicksand. Every move she made to help Sarah seemed to complicate the situation even further. And for the first time since she learned about her friend's promotion, she wondered if it would be better to simply let Sarah make her own decisions, even if it meant facing the consequences alone. But as she drove back to her apartment, one image persisted in her mind. Sarah, naive and confident, walking unknowingly toward a precipice that could destroy not only her career, but her entire life. And Jessica couldn't imagine how she would live with herself if she didn't do everything in her power to prevent that. Friday arrived, charged with an electric tension that seemed to permeate every corner of Tech Global Innovations. Sarah had spent the last 2 days trying to form her team for the Nexus project, but she encountered resistance in every department she visited. The more experienced employees claimed to be overwhelmed with existing projects, while the younger ones showed enthusiasm but lacked the experience necessary to handle the complexity of what was being proposed. Sitting in her new office, Sarah watched the rain begin to fall over New York through the windows overlooking Central Park. Her desk was covered with resumes, budget spreadsheets, and timelines that seemed increasingly ambitious and unrealistic. The project that had seemed so exciting on Monday now presented a maze of political and logistical challenges that left her exhausted just contemplating it. A knock on the door interrupted her dark thoughts. Jessica entered without waiting for a response, bringing 2 cups of coffee and a serious expression that immediately put Sarah on alert. "We need to talk," Jessica said, closing the door behind her and activating the lock, a gesture that made Sarah furrow her brow. "About what? And why are you locking the door?" Jessica sat down in front of the desk, placing one of the cups in front of Sarah. "Because what I have to tell you is confidential and potentially dangerous." Sarah felt a familiar chill, the same one she had experienced during the conversation with Michael at the cafe on Madison Avenue. "Jessica, you are making me scaring." "You should be." Sarah opened her bag, pulling out some printed documents. "Lisa, Tech Global Innovations is being investigated by the FBI." The words hit Lisa like a lightning bolt. "What? Financial crimes? Money laundering, inflated contracts, embezzlement of public funds?" Sarah spread the documents across the table. "The investigation has been ongoing for 6 months. Lisa picked up one of the papers with trembling hands. It was a newspaper clipping from an economics website, dated 3 months ago, with a brief note about investigations into tech companies for tax irregularities. "Sarah, how did you get this?" "That doesn't matter now. What matters is that you are being used as a front for a corruption scheme that could send everyone involved to prison." Lisa abruptly stood up, walking to the window. Down below, ordinary people lived their normal lives, oblivious to the drama unfolding on the 22nd floor. "Michael told me about the irregularities. He said he wants to expose everything, clean up the company." "Michael told you?" Sarah also stood up, moving closer to her friend. "Lisa, when? And why didn't you tell me this?" "On Wednesday. He showed me documents about an employee who discovered the scheme and was fired." Lisa turned to face Sarah. "He said he chose me precisely because he needed someone trustworthy to help him fix everything. And you believed him?" "I don't know what to believe anymore. But Sarah, what if he's telling the truth? What if we can actually use the Nexus project to expose the irregularities and transform the company?" Sarah grabbed Lisa's shoulders, forcing her to look directly into her eyes. "Lisa, listen to what I'm saying. The FBI is going to launch an operation in the coming weeks. When that happens, all the company's executives will be investigated, including you." "But I didn't do anything." "It doesn't matter. You are a director now. You have access to privileged information. You are leading a project that may be used to justify irregular expenses." Sarah paused, letting the words sink in. "Lisa, you could be arrested." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of rain hitting the windows. Lisa felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet, leaving her floating in a terrifying void. "What should I do?" she whispered. "Resign today. Make up any excuse, family problems, health issues, conflict of interest. But leave Tech Global before it's too late. And what if Michael is being honest? What if he really wants to clean the company? Then let him clean it up alone. Lisa, you have a whole life ahead of you. David, your family, your career. Don't throw it all away for a man you've known for 3 years." Lisa returned to her chair, burying her face in her hands. "It's more complicated than that, Sarah." "How so?" "Because—" Lisa hesitated, knowing her next words would forever change the dynamic of her most precious friendship. "Because I don't know if I still want the life I've built. The marriage with David, the plans we've made together, the safe and predictable version of myself." Sarah sat down slowly, as if Lisa's words were physically heavy. "Lisa, you are in love with Michael." It wasn't a question, but a statement that fell over the room like a sentence. Lisa didn't respond, but her flushed cheeks were answer enough. "Oh my God, Lisa, oh my God." "Sarah, no. Don't try to explain or justify." Sarah stood up again, pacing nervously around the room. "Lisa, are you willing to risk your freedom, your reputation, your future for a man who may be lying to you? What if he isn't lying? What if he is? What if this whole story about wanting to clean the company is just a sophisticated way to manipulate you? To use you as a human shield when everything comes to light?" Lisa stood up, facing her friend. "Sarah, I know you are worried about me. I know you want to protect me. But I can't live my whole life afraid to take risks. Calculated risks, yes. But this is professional suicide. Maybe, or maybe it's the first time in my life that I'm really choosing who I want to be." Sarah stopped walking, fixing her eyes on Lisa with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "And David? What about him?" "I don't know." "You don't know?" "Lisa, the man wants to marry you. He has planned a lifetime by your side. A life he planned. Not us, him." Lisa felt an unexpected clarity grow within her. "Sarah, when was the last time David asked me what I really want? When was the last time we talked about my dreams, my ambitions, my fears?" That's normal in long-term relationships. People get comfortable. Or maybe they never really connected. Sarah approached again, her voice taking on an almost desperate tone. "Lisa, you are making the biggest mistake of your life. Michael is a powerful, charismatic man, used to getting what he wants. You are a challenge for him, a conquest. When he gets tired of you—" "Enough!" Lisa slammed her hand on the table, surprising both of them. "Sarah, I appreciate your concern. I will always appreciate it. But this is my decision to make. Even if it means destroying your life, even if it means finally having a life worth living." Sarah recoiled as if she had been slapped. For a moment, the two women stared at each other in silence, 15 years of friendship hanging in the air between them like a thread about to snap. "If this is your decision," Sarah finally said, her voice laden with a coldness Lisa had never heard before, "then I can no longer help you." "Sarah, no. Lisa, I can't stand by and watch you self-destruct. I can't be complicit in your ruin." Sarah grabbed her bag, heading for the door. "When everything falls apart, and it will fall apart, don't come looking for my shoulder to cry on." The door closed with a click that echoed through the room like a gunshot. Lisa was left alone, surrounded. Marina stared at the documents related to Project Nexus and the weight of the decisions she had made. For the first time since Monday, she allowed herself to question whether she was making the biggest mistake of her life. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Michael. "Sarah, I found more information about Jessica. Can you meet me tonight? It's important." Sarah looked at the message for a long moment, then typed her response, "Where and when?" While waiting for the reply, she had no way of knowing that 5 floors below, FBI agents were already positioned in the building's lobby, waiting for the order to ascend. The operation would be launched on Monday morning. Sarah had exactly 60 hours to decide which side of the story she wanted to be on when everything came to light. Sunday dawned grey over New York. with a light drizzle that seemed to mirror Sarah's state of mind as she drove through the deserted streets toward Michael's apartment in the Upper West Side. It had been a sleepless night, filled with revelations that completely changed her perception of everything that had happened in the last 8 months. In the bag beside the passenger seat, she carried documents that Jessica Taylor had handed her personally the night before. Documents proving that the truth was far more complex and dangerous than she had imagined. The meeting with Jessica had been arranged by Michael for 8 o'clock on Saturday night at a small restaurant in Chelsea. Sarah had arrived expecting to find a frightened victim, but instead encountered a determined and brave woman who had spent the last 8 months not hiding, but gathering evidence of a scheme that went far beyond Tech Global Innovations. Sarah, Jessica had said, her green eyes shining with an intensity that mixed indignation and hope. You need to understand that what I discovered at Tech Global is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a network of companies involved, politicians, public officials. It's a system that has been functioning for decades. The documents Jessica brought revealed a sophisticated money laundering scheme using dozens of tech companies as a front. Inflated public contracts, fake invoices, offshore accounts, everything meticulously documented by someone who had dedicated the last months of her life to exposing the truth. "Why didn't you give all this to the FBI?" Sarah had asked. "Because I did," Jessica replied with a bitter smile. "I was the one who made the initial report 8 months ago, but I found out that some investigators may be compromised. Information leaks, investigations that mysteriously lose momentum, witnesses changing their stories." It was then that Michael revealed his true role in the story. "Sarah," he had said, taking her hand across the restaurant table, "I didn't take over the presidency of Tech Global just because my father died. I took over because the FBI approached me 6 months ago. They needed someone on the inside to gather evidence that could be used in court." The revelation hit Sarah like a lightning bolt. "You're an informant?" "I'm a collaborator. When I discovered the scheme after my father's death, I had 2 options: be prosecuted as an accomplice or help dismantle everything. I chose to help. And me? What's my role in this? Initially, you were supposed to be just an unconscious ally, an integral person who would help me implement real changes in the company while I gathered evidence." Michael paused, carefully choosing his words. "But then I started to genuinely care about you, and I realized I needed to tell you the truth." Now, driving through the wet streets toward his apartment, Sarah reflected on the choices she would have to make. The operation would be launched on Monday morning. That was certain. Robert Smith, Beatrice Johnson, and other directors would be arrested. The company would be shut down. Accounts would be frozen, lives would be destroyed. Michael's apartment occupied the top floor of a 1960s building with large windows offering a panoramic view of the city. The decor was minimalist yet cozy, modern furniture mixed with some antique pieces that seemed to hold sentimental value. The aroma of fresh coffee filled the air, mingling with the scent of rain coming through the slightly open windows. "How are you feeling?" Michael asked, pouring coffee into 2 white porcelain cups. "Confused, scared, relieved to finally know the truth." Sarah sat on the light leather sofa, accepting the cup with hands that still trembled slightly. "Michael, I need to know one thing. Is what you feel for me real, or is it part of the operation?" The question hung in the air between them like a bridge she needed to cross to find peace. Michael sat down beside her, not so close as to invade her personal space, but close enough for her to see the sincerity in his eyes. "Sarah, when I started this collaboration with the FBI, I was focused solely on clearing my family's name and saving the company. You were supposed to be just a piece on the chessboard." He paused, placing the cup on the coffee table. "But in our first conversation at the company party, I realized there was something special about you, an integrity, an inner strength that made me want to be a better person. And Project Nexus, was it real?" "Completely real. Jessica's project is brilliant, and my intention has always been to implement it after this whole situation is resolved, with you leading." Sarah took a sip of the coffee, savoring the bitterness that mirrored the complexity of her feelings. "Michael, do you understand that after Monday everything changes? The company may not exist anymore. You could be seen as a traitor by some, a hero by others. And you will be free to choose what you want to do with your life, including choosing whether to be with a man who spent months lying to me." Michael stood up, walking to the window overlooking the park. "Sarah, I'm not going to try to justify myself or ask for forgiveness for having... I omitted the truth. I know I broke your trust, and I understand if you can't forgive that. It's not about forgiveness, Michael. It's about understanding if I can trust you moving forward. And can you?" Sarah joined him at the window, watching the city stretch to the horizon. Down below, people walked under umbrellas, each carrying their own secrets and dilemmas. "I don't know. But I want to find out." Michael's phone rang, interrupting the moment. It was the federal agent in charge of the operation, confirming the final details for Monday. Sarah heard fragments of the conversation: teams positioned, signed warrants, simultaneous arrests. "It's confirmed," Michael said after hanging up. "Monday at 7 in the morning. And me? What should I do?" "Jessica suggested you don't show up at the office on Monday. Blame anything, a health issue, a family emergency. When it all starts, you'll be safe." Sarah nodded, but a part of her felt like a coward fleeing the battle. "And after? What happens to us? After we rebuild, Tech Global can be sold, or it can be restructured under new management. There are investors interested in creating a truly ethical company based on the principles of Project Nexus." Michael turned to face her. "Sarah, I would like you to consider leading this new company as CEO. With full autonomy, sufficient resources, and a clear mission to prove that it's possible to succeed in business without compromising ethics." The offer was tempting, but Sarah knew there were more urgent matters to resolve. "Michael, before thinking about professional futures, I need to sort out my personal life. David, he deserves to know the truth about how I feel. He deserves the chance to find someone who loves him the way he deserves to be loved. And if he fights for you, then I will respect his decision, but I will hold on to mine." Michael stepped closer, stopping just inches from her. "And what is your decision?" Sarah looked into his eyes, seeing no longer the powerful and mysterious CEO who had seduced her, but a man who had risked everything to do the right thing. An imperfect man who had made mistakes, but was trying to build something better on the ruins of the past. "My decision is that I want to discover who I can become when I'm not trying to please everyone. I want to explore this person who has been growing inside me since our first conversation. And I want to do that by your side, if you're willing to be patient while I learn how to love without fear." The answer came in the form of a kiss, soft at first, then more intense, laden with 8 months of unresolved tension and the promise of a future they would build together, brick by brick on the solid foundation of truth. As they kissed at the window of the apartment, with New York stretching infinitely around them, Sarah finally understood what Michael had tried to tell her months ago. Sometimes, the best decisions in our lives are the ones that scare us the most. On Monday morning, as the FBI sirens echoed through the halls of Tech Global Innovations, Sarah sat in her apartment's kitchen, brewing coffee and rehearsing the words she would say to David when he woke up. Honest and painful words, but necessary for both of them to find the happiness they deserved. 3 months later, the investigation would reveal a corruption scheme that had embezzled over $50 million over 5 years. Robert Smith and Beatrice Johnson were sentenced to prison terms ranging from 8 to 12 years. Tech Global was sold to a consortium of international investors interested in creating a socially responsible business model. And Sarah Johnson, at 43, took the presidency of New Tech Global, a company dedicated to proving that financial success and social responsibility could not only coexist, but also mutually enhance each other. Her first act as CEO was to hire Jessica Taylor as Chief Compliance Officer and Jessica Brown as Chief Legal Officer. The latter accepted the invitation after a long reconciliation process that involved many honest conversations about friendship, protection, and the difference between caring for someone and trying to control their life. David, after the initial shock and a necessary period of mourning for the relationship they had shared, found true love with a co-worker who shared his vision of a simple and stable life. They married a year later in a small but warm ceremony, which Sarah attended as a guest, genuinely happy to see her ex-fiancé fulfilled. And Michael learned that leading an honest company was much more challenging and rewarding than running an empire built on lies. He and Sarah married 2 years later in an outdoor ceremony in the heart of New York, surrounded by the employees of New Tech Global, which was now internationally recognized as a model of ethical business excellence. But the greatest transformation had happened within Sarah Johnson. The woman who once accepted whispered invitations out of fear of disappointing others had become a respected leader, making decisions based on her own convictions. A woman who learned that true power does not come from pleasing everyone, but from being true to one's own values. And when young professionals sought her out for advice on navigating complex corporate environments, Sarah always concluded her words with the same reflection that had changed her life. Sometimes, the most dangerous invitations are those that offer us exactly what we thought we wanted. But the most transformative invitations are those that challenge us to discover who we really are.